Well, thank you, everyone. It's great to see so many new faces here tonight. So now we're going to turn it over to our program, and I'll start off by introducing Erin. And apologies, Erin, I'm going to read your bio. Um, Erin Connell brings her passion for public service and capacity building to her role as Senior Program Manager at Cause Strategy Partners. Her work focuses on expanding the Board Lead program nationally, strategically designing the program to enter new markets, as well as overseeing the successful implementation of strong nonprofit board matches. Through CSB's board placement program, Board Lead, Erin focuses on recruiting diverse candidates to be matched to nonprofit boards across the US, strengthening the overall governance and the values of diversity, equity, and inclusion across the nonprofit sector. Ooh, excuse me. Erin has worked previously in both social sector and nonprofit consulting, with a particular emphasis on organizational development, capacity building, program evaluation, and strategic planning. Erin is passionate about board governance, and she is a current board member of the North Shore Soup Kitchen and previously served as the co-chair of the alumni board at City Year, New York. Erin completed her MPA in public and nonprofit management at the Robert F. Wagner School of Public Service at NYU. During her time at Wagner, she focused her studies on policy as well as nonprofit management and compliance. Erin was a recipient of the NYU Wagner's Joe Ivy Buford Award for creating innovative solutions to public service challenges, and served as the peer-elected president of the Wagner Student Association. Erin earned her BA in philosophy and human rights from Columbia University. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Erin. Thanks so much for being here with us today.
Awesome. Thanks, Kate. I've never had someone read my bio out loud, at least when I've been in the room. That was very weird for me, but I appreciate the introduction. Thank you for that. And thank you to the whole team at Food and Friends for having me today. As I said before, really excited about this conversation. There are four things that I wanted to highlight. So I'll walk through those at a high level and then sort of dig in. So first, even though that bio was a full 3 paragraphs, I want to share just a little bit more about myself that I think will sort of set the scene for how I think about board service. I want to share then a bit about what board service looks like in terms of best practices and what I've learned in my work doing board development and consulting in that area. Then building on that, I want to share a little bit about my own experience in serving on an auxiliary board, and then shifting into serving on a board of directors. And then on that board of directors piece, sort of touch on what does it look like to serve as a high impact board member. So that's what I'm going to share about. Let's jump right in. So you heard quite a bit about my background, but I'll share just a tiny bit more. I am from South Jersey, outside of Philadelphia, and I grew up with parents who really got my siblings and I involved in volunteering locally. It was a value that was instilled in my own upbringing from a very young age. And it sounds like that's something that many folks on this call have also experienced, having that be, a real value and even something that's passed down generations within a family, which can be a really powerful thing. So that was certainly my experience. And I grew up being very cognizant of my privileges and recognizing that, at least in my own belief, that I'm certainly not deserving of them, and that it's really critical for me to take those privileges and really support others, and give back. So for me, I really see that as a through line through all of my personal and professional experiences, that I personally feel really called to be a part of something bigger than myself, and to help other folks. So for me, it's super exciting to work with nonprofits and to work with boards every day, because you all are doing work in your community to make it a better place, to lift all boats, to help everyone out, and to just really be a good neighbor, a good community member, and that kind of involvement. Those small touch moments are how big picture change happens. So with that, just want to again thank all of you for the work that you do. Whether it's your full-time job or you're volunteering, that's brought you here. It's a decision that you've made to give back in that way. And I think it's really powerful and really significant. And as I said, it's something that I really value as well. So for me, it's led me to really devote my whole professional life to wanting to support nonprofits. In terms of nonprofit governance, this can get a little bit wonky. So hopefully what I'm about to say is not too boring and hopefully is a little bit helpful. I know sometimes folks think about what board member roles and responsibilities look like as something called time, talent, and treasure. Has anyone ever heard that phrase? Time, talent, treasure, something or something like that, right? People use sort of three buckets like that a lot with boards. And I think that's a helpful way of thinking about it at a high level. But I also think it can limit what our board engagement actually looks like, right? If we only think about, oh, I have to show up at a meeting, right, and donate my time. Oh, I have to give my annual dues, right, and just get out my credit card. Oh, I have to, think about what skills can I bring? How can I help? How can I do that pro bono thing 1 or 2 times a year, right, and check that box. I think it can really limit what that engagement looks like. And thereby limit the ability we have to support an organization and again to really give back and drive change. So I think it's helpful to think about board service across 4 buckets. And those are setting strategy, driving resources, leveraging skills, and then providing fiduciary oversight. And that's where it really gets fun. But those 4 buckets, I think, are the main sort of roles and responsibilities that board members have. Um, if folks are familiar with BoardSource, they're actually based in DC and they put out a lot of like content, thought leadership, resources and stuff like that for nonprofits and for governing boards. Um, and they have a really great list of sort of the 10 key board member roles and responsibilities. They don't have it bucketed out in that way, but at Cause Strategy Partners, that's really how we bucket out what a board service looks like: strategy, resources, skills, and fiduciary oversight. So first, thinking about an auxiliary board, a young professionals board is a great example of an auxiliary board. An auxiliary board, isn't doing all 4 of those buckets. They're really focusing on 2, those being driving resources and leveraging professional skills. Now, again, I think when we think of driving resources, we oftentimes think of, that annual check or like a Facebook fundraiser or getting out your credit card, right? Signing up for an event and getting the dinner, right? Which is all amazing and that counts. But it's important too to think about how to be strategic with really driving resources towards an organization. So when we talk about resources, we're not just talking about money, right? We're also talking about human resources, right? How can you, from your board seat, think about who else should be in the room? How can I recruit folks to be volunteers? How can I recruit folks to serve on this board or serve on other auxiliary boards with Food and Friends, right? That capital really counts and adds a lot of value to an organization, right? So building the board is a big part of that. But it's beyond just building the board, right? I mentioned like volunteering, getting out there and just advocating for your mission. I think as much as, it might sound not super fun at, virtual cocktail hours or game nights and stuff to talk about your board service, that's how you get the word out there, talking about how was your week. My week was great. I started it off Monday night with this awesome event with Food and Friends, right? And just talking to people about it really gets the word out there and can have a huge impact for your organization. And frankly, it sounds like some of you have even been impacted by that, right? Hearing about Food and Friends from people that you work with or from other folks in your network. So being able to capitalize on that momentum and sort of bring that forward in your own board service, I think is a great thing to be able to do. And then, of course, there is the part where you get out your checkbook, and get out your credit card. But I think it's important to think about resources and really driving resources in a more nuanced and complex way. And then the other part of a typical auxiliary board service, of course, is leveraging your skills. You've all shared that you have incredible jobs. It sounds like you're doing incredible work and giving back to the community in a real range of different ways. I think sometimes it can feel limiting to think about, if someone has a super specialized profession. So for example, I have a friend who works in public health, right? And she might think, well, it's more it's going to be most beneficial for me, for her, right, to serve on a board that does some kind of health policy or community-based health initiatives. But she could really bring that to any board, right? Any organization is going to have implications for their mission that interact with public health, that interact with political initiatives, policy initiatives around health and wellness. So I think really thinking about your skill set broadly in terms of your professional work is helpful. And then also just stepping back and thinking about, what other skills do I have? And what skills don't I have that I want to build up? So for me, for example, you heard quite a bit about my background. It is not in financial management at all whatsoever. That is not a skill of mine. But in my current board service, I'm actually looking to lean into that a little bit more and find opportunities to review the balance sheets more closely, really work with the treasurer to better understand, what does a nonprofit P&L actually show me? How are they designing it? What are the implications of different ways of, allocating the budget and stuff like that? For me, that's a huge learning opportunity, right? And I can bring that back to my own professional life and build my skills in that way. So those are the two buckets I think we see most often in auxiliary boards. Then, of course, on governing boards, we have the other two buckets I mentioned before, where board members are really responsible for setting strategy and providing fiduciary oversight. So in terms of setting strategy, this is a really, really important piece of board service. And I think this is one of the key pieces that's lost when we think about board service just in terms of time, talent, treasure, right? We don't hear the language there around strategy and really sort of sinking your teeth deeply into the work of board service. So with setting strategy, we're talking about working closely with the organization's leadership to really assess and design the direction that the organization's going in. Thinking about, is our mission the right mission statement? Do we need to change the language? What's our vision? Where do we see ourselves in 5 years, in 10 years? If we put ourselves out of a job as an organization, how are we going to know that, right? What's the world that we're trying to design through our work? What does success look like for our organization? And then with responses to all of those questions, actually setting strategy for how to get there. What are the steps that'll get us to those goals? How are we measuring our outcomes? Again, how will we know when we get there, but how are we getting there? Who's doing the work? And thinking really carefully about how the board plugs in to support that, and how the staff plugs in as well. So that's the setting strategy piece. Then on the fiduciary oversight piece, again, for me, this is not the exciting, fun, sexy part of board service, but it is a really, really, really critical piece for boards of directors to tap into. So here it's thinking about, providing that financial oversight, making sure that the staff is really designing a budget that's going to work for the organization. But it also looks like other things outside of just the financials, right? We're saying fiduciary oversight, not just financial oversight, because the board also oversees the CEO or the executive director, that lead staff person of the organization, right? They should be setting annual goals for that person. They should be doing an annual performance review and really supporting that chief executive in getting their work done and leading the staff team to do the work. So those are some really, really critical pieces of the board's work outside of just that financial bucket that I think we typically think about. Another one is, they're setting strategy. On this fiduciary oversight piece, the board should also be following up, right? And making sure, how is it moving forward? Last year we did a planning process. We set goals for year one. We're now at the end of year one. How are we doing? How's it going? Do we need to reset anything? The board should be really driving those conversations. So that's, I would say, the biggest sort of difference in terms of roles and responsibilities between auxiliary boards and boards of directors. And then I just want to share quickly, I don't want to, I'll just speak for a few more minutes, I promise, but want to share just quickly a little bit about my own experience as a professional on an auxiliary board and then shifting onto a governing board. So as Kate shared, I previously served with an auxiliary board in New York City. I'm actually located in the New York area. With City Year New York, I will say I served with City Year in DC from 2008 to 2009. So I am unfortunately aware of the swampiness that it sounds like you're all experiencing today. And I'm so sorry. And I hope your air conditioning is all working or at least coming back to life. That DC summer is rough. So I did City Year in DC and then moved to New York. And I served with it's called the the alumni board of City Year New York. So it's folks who previously served with the organization and then want to be part of the alumni network on the board there in New York. So I served for a few years as just a member, and then there was an opportunity to lead a committee, and I raised my hand for that opportunity. And then after being a committee chair for a couple years, there was actually an opportunity to serve as the board co-chair, which again, I raised my hand for. So I was able to really serve in a few different roles with that alumni board in New York. For me, it was a really great opportunity, not only because I do work in this area and it was a great way to apply my skills for my job outside of work, but it was also a great opportunity for me to meet folks that I wouldn't have otherwise met, other young professionals in the New York area. It was a way for me to take my skills and apply them in a way that I wouldn't normally at work, to build my skills, and to also give back in a way that to me felt really meaningful. And it sounds like those are things that you're all experiencing. With COVID, I have been thinking a lot about, how I spend my time and how I give back. Again, it sounds like a lot of you are thinking about that and being really thoughtful and really giving as you've considered how you spend your time and how you give back. For me, I honestly got to a point where I just felt like, city year's work around education didn't feel like my calling anymore. It just wasn't something I felt like I could get behind. And that's a real problem if you have board members who are not like living the mission of the organization, right? Your board is overseeing your CEO, right? You want your board to be 100% there and just like totally fired up about your mission. And so it felt like the right time to step down. And with that, I had a bit more time in my schedule and actually moved out of New York City with COVID to have a little bit more space. And in the community I was in, was feeling really isolated and actually felt like it was a great opportunity to tap into a local nonprofit. So I basically just did a cold call to this local soup kitchen and asked, are there volunteer shifts? How can I give back? How can I show up? And they just happened to be recruiting board members. And, given the work that I do, they were excited about my candidacy. We had a few conversations, went through the interview process, site visit, all of that. And so I've been on their board now for a couple of months. In terms of making that shift, I think there are a few things that are really critical for sort of leveraging those kinds of opportunities. One was that I had been able to take on this leadership role, and I think that can look like a lot of things. During COVID, the city year board I was on, there was one of our team members raised her hand and said, I think we need someone to be overseeing the culture of our board because we're all doing this virtually and it's really tough and it doesn't feel like it's quite working. So we amplified what she was saying and gave her a leadership position on the executive committee as the culture lead. And that wasn't a position that existed. And she just raised her hand and said, I see an opportunity for leadership. I'm going to do this. So it doesn't even have to be an existing leadership opportunity. And I know, Kate, I know certainly that's something that you're familiar with. So that kind of thinking outside the box, I think, is a great way to really leverage, your enthusiasm and passion. I think also something that helped me was being able to measure what I'd done and what our board had accomplished. So measuring, how much did we raise? What were the goals that we set in terms of board engagement? How did we meet those goals? Were we able to, get more folks to our events and things like that? Really having clear data, clear outcomes is a great way to, again, say, here are my successes. Here's what I helped to do. And I can bring that to your board. And then I think the third thing is something I've already spoken to, and I think others have as well, just really thinking about that mission passion. For me, I'm excited about the mission of Food and Friends because I'm excited about the mission of this soup kitchen. It's something that I grew up, I mentioned before, I grew up volunteering and I grew up, on Thanksgiving and Christmas, my family would go to soup kitchens and food kitchens in our area and serve food. Like that's how we would spend the holiday. That's something that's really important to me. And so just taking the time to step back from a board that I realized I wasn't passionate about anymore, and really thinking about, what gets me excited, what really drives my passion, and then throwing myself into that, I think was really important. So I feel like I've spoken quite enough. I'm going to stop and want to make sure that there's enough time for Brian, you to speak as well. Thanks everyone for listening and excited for the conversation to come.
Thank you so much, Erin, for sharing your personal story and your experience and defining those four buckets. I think that strategy piece is one that I kind of forget about. So I'm sure others do too. But it's really interesting. And I definitely have a question for you about that. But for now, I will introduce Brian. And Brian, I hope you don't get uncomfortable with people reading your bio because I'm about to do that. Brian is a senior manager at PricewaterhouseCoopers with the advisory practice. He has over 12 years of experience working with a diverse client base to drive successful transformational programs and improve overall execution and performance. His specialty areas of focus include management consulting, information technology, and project management. He serves as a mentor and coach to staff and has made it a priority to cultivate talent and promote diversity and inclusion in the workplace. Brian is a graduate of Virginia Tech with a BS degree in Business Information Technology. Brian lives in Washington, D.C. with his wife, Baynaz, I hope I'm saying that right, and 2-year-old son. He's an active member of his community and has a passion for helping at-risk youth. In his spare time, Brian enjoys staying active, learning about other cultures through travel, and experiencing flavors and tastes from around the world. Brian, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. As Erin mentioned, it's kind of weird to have someone read your bio. It's the first time I've had that happen, but it's pretty cool. So thank you for that. But as I mentioned earlier, I joined the Food and Friends Board of Directors on March 31st, so less than 3 months ago. So, I'll just spend some time sharing kind of my path to board membership and my experiences so far. So, as was mentioned, I work at PricewaterhouseCoopers or PwC. And PwC is fortunate enough to have a nonprofit board placement program, Board Lead. So I think Erin mentioned it briefly, but essentially Board Lead does all the recruitment, the placement, the training of employees or potential board candidates. So for me, I think the only requirement that I remember was needing to be a manager and having, I want to say, 8 years of experience. Professional experience was essentially the only requirement. So, from my perspective, I thought the process was super easy and very streamlined. So, you kind of start by looking at the different nonprofits in your city, right? So understanding what's their mission statement, what does their organizational structure look like, just learning some of the key facts about, the different nonprofits. And then, really thinking about, what are you interested in? So, again, Erin mentioned this, what is your passion, what drives you? That's, super important, right? Because you want to make sure that, the potential match or, if you're selected to serve on this board, that your passion and interests match up, right? It should be a fit from both sides, essentially. So, again, you kind of inventory the different nonprofits, and then Board Lead has a super streamlined application process where you're basically just writing about your work experience, your community involvement, your volunteer experience, and some skills that you think would benefit the board. And then, for me, just kind of shot that away, and Board Lead did their magic, and they generated a match. And fortunate for me, I was selected with or matched with Food and Friends, which was one of my top choices. So it worked out perfectly. But I think regardless if you're going through Board Lead or if you're doing it the traditional way, you should essentially treat this like you're applying for a job, right? So you're going to have that first meeting. You got to prepare like it's a job, right? So you're going to be meeting with potentially the CEO or executive director of the nonprofit, the board president, the nominating committee, et cetera. So, just really taking the time to understand the company, understand their mission, really just getting a feel for, the service that's done within the community, I think is, super important, right? Then after that first meeting, you'll go through kind of the, board vetting process, which again is similar to interviewing for a job, a series of, discussions, interviews, meeting with additional nonprofit leadership, other board members. So again, preparation is key. And I think Board Lead, just to give another shout out, did a very good job of preparing me for the opportunity, right? Just providing different training resources, information on board governance. I thought that was extremely important, right? And that's probably some information that you could research on your own as well, right? So if you're given the opportunity to potentially, interview for a board position, again, I just recommend that you do the research, understand what the board's about, understand how it works, understand that strategy piece. Those will, be kind of key points that you'll want to explore before jumping into support service. So yeah, I'll pause there. Does anyone have any questions about, just kind of how the application process went, things that you should consider or think about before joining a board or showing interest?
Brian,
if not, I can. Yep.
Oh, I was going to say, not about joining a board, but can you talk about kind of the onboarding process once you join the board, and what you should expect in terms of onboarding?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is you're sent this packet of board materials, right? So it's, again, a detailed overview of the nonprofit, right? So you just have to take some time to understand the company, understand, what's their service, understand the financials. There's many different parts that go into it. So, that's the first part. And then I think second, it was, just an opportunity to meet a lot of people, right? You met people within the board, people within the organization, understanding their roles, how they function, how they operate. That was also key to the onboarding process. And then, as far as getting started, understanding the committees within, the different committees within the board, trying to figure out where your skills align, where that best fit would be. And then also actually getting rolling up your sleeves, right? Actually doing some volunteering. Like I had the opportunity to actually volunteer within the kitchen. So just seeing firsthand how, they operate at Food and Friends, seeing the building, seeing the facilities, I thought was critical to onboard. Does that answer your question? Okay. Any other questions before I continue? Okay. And I always get the question, what are the benefits of joining a nonprofit board, or what made you decide to join? And for me, it came down to three things. The first is just staying engaged and being able to solve important problems within the community, right? So I'm a proud DC resident. And as was mentioned, I have a passion for helping at-risk youth, communities affected by poverty. So I felt that Food and Friends mission directly aligned with, again, my passion and my interests, right? So for me, it was a no-brainer. It was a great opportunity for me to, again, stay engaged and kind of serve my community. The second area I would say is just the opportunity for continuous learning, right? So board service gives you the opportunity to sharpen your technical skills, your leadership skills. For example, working on a finance committee, right, gives you an opportunity to sharpen those finance and those accounting skills, things that you may have not used since college. You'll get a chance to kind of, break those out or sharpen those up, through serving on board. Another example would be an outreach committee, right? So if you're passionate about diversity and inclusion and topics in that area, that could be something of interest to you as well, right? And overall, I think just, being a board member really gives you the opportunity to grow personally and professionally in areas that you're not exposed to in your day-to-day job, right? So I work at PricewaterhouseCoopers. They're an advisory audit tax firm, right? So I'm working with Fortune 500 companies. I'm really not discussing, things related to poverty or issues affecting the community, right? So it gives me an opportunity to kind of step away from, almost like the superficial, money-driven world and actually do some grassroots, efforts, right? Things that actually impact people day to day in my community. So, I think that's extremely important. And I would say the third kind of area is networking. And this is really self-explanatory, right? So you're given the opportunity to meet other great leaders, really just amazing people that do amazing work in your community. So hands down, networking is an obvious benefit of, joining a nonprofit. So again, my experience to date has been great. I've already had the opportunity to meet so many amazing individuals within, Food and Friends and the board. It's mostly been virtual given COVID, but I hope as things improve and DC begins to open up, that we'll be able to have some in-person events. again, as I mentioned, I was able to volunteer in the soup kitchen. I plan on doing the actual food delivery shortly. So that's, something I look forward to. And then really, just getting an opportunity to participate in events like this, right? So working with, other, future leaders, getting an opportunity to serve on a committee, I think is going to be something very important. And I think one thing that's unique to consulting is we do a lot of what we call pro bono projects, right? So, just connecting with nonprofits, understanding if they need strategic support in different areas. I'd be happy to pull in some of my team members just to kind of help, solve an important problem, right? Help think through, crunch some data, and really just, kind of dive in and see if we can solve one of the problems facing Food and Friends, right? So my advice to someone who's interested in a board position, I would say, well, not even a board position, but just a leadership position in general. I would say, is know your end game, right? So where do you want to be in 1 year? Where do you want to be in 2 years, 5 years, whatever it is? Just take the time to formalize your goals, right? Maybe put it on paper and actually, just build that bottoms up, right? Just think through strategically, tactically, what do I need to do to reach that goal, right? So if your goal is to be on a board of directors for a nonprofit, then figure out ways to get involved in your community, right? Reach out to a current board member just to learn more about the organization and how the board works. I think knowing what you're passionate about and starting to target a few of those organizations within your area is also going to be key, right? And if your goals change, which they typically do over time, I think that's okay. You can always pivot, right? So just rethink what is it you want to do, kind of rework those steps, right? And start to chip away at getting to where you want to be, right? So it's kind of know your mission, and your path will become a lot more clearer once you're able to crystallize what that mission is for yourself, right? So I'll pause there. And any questions?
So I don't know if this is a question more for Brian and Erin or for the Food and Folks staffers, but it seems like certainly people who know an organization, as well as people who are new to an organization, they can each bring something unique to the table that I think would be valuable on a board. And it sounds like, Erin, you had both experiences, right? So I'm curious to know, from the Food and Friends perspective, but also, more generally, what is there a sense, amongst sort of, I guess, the board community of if there's an ideal balance between people who know the organization well versus other people that can come in and give a fresh perspective on their operations?
I mean, from a Food and Friends perspective, we really look both internally among our donor base and volunteer base for board members, and looking externally, people who may not be familiar with the mission, but may be interested in the mission. I mean, I think that builds a strong board, because you don't have kind of group think, and you do have fresh ideas and perspectives. So from our board recruitment approach, that's really, we do like to have that balance of people who are very familiar with the mission and people like Brian, who were recently introduced to the mission.
Yeah, no, thank you. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I would just add, it's kind of the latter point that Carolyn raised, right? So, for me coming in, I think the key thing was just to be inquisitive, right? So, my first board meeting, I'm not just jumping in, making random recommendations. I'm really taking the time to kind of learn the, Food and Friends posture, right? What's important, really, understanding tactically how they handle things. I think, just getting the time to taking the time to know the organization and know the fellow board members is important, right? So granted, I don't know everything about, Food and Friends. I'm still learning. But like I said, just being inquisitive and really, just putting a learning hat on is important.
So Brian, in terms of the matching process that you said you went through, right. So what is that based on, aside from, sort of the type of organization you want to work with? Like what what are they matching exactly? Is it based on your particular skills and background? Is it that the boards are looking for expertise in a certain area? If you could give us a little bit more insight into that process, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, so I mean, Erin may know a little bit more, but again, I think the key thing is, just it's first your skill set, right, and then your interests. Like I said, those two have to kind of mesh, right? So they're looking at what drives you, what are you passionate about, but also what can you bring to the board, right? Is it financial skill set, right? Is it a technical skill set? If they're looking to, do something analytical or dive into data, right? Like, do you bring that skill set? So, I think it's a mix of different things, and it may vary between, different boards. But I think your application process, your interview, really, again, it's going to tease out what are those critical aspects, right? Like, what are they looking for? Is it a good match? Does it fit? Again, your mission, things that you're passionate about. I think there has to be alignment between those.
Yeah, and I can just add on if that's all right. And Brian, so great to hear about so many positive parts of your experience. Our team may or may not be reaching out to you to learn more. But I think Brian highlighted, we at Board Lead, as I mentioned before, we work with Fortune 500 companies to recruit their professionals and get those folks matched to really great nonprofit boards. If anyone's interested in learning more, I'm happy to talk offline about our program. But Brian's experience, I think, is a great example. We match folks first and foremost on their mission, passion, alignment. We're never going to match someone if they're not excited about a nonprofit, if it's not an organization where they see themselves, if it's not a place where they're excited about. Because we know that board service is really driven by someone's enthusiasm for the organization's work. So we want to make sure that we're setting the organization and that individual up for success. So that mission, passion, alignment is our first criteria. And then, as Brian spoke about, we really look at everything a candidate brings and then everything a nonprofit is looking for. So, Brian spoke to filling out an application, and, we asked him about, skills and background and expertise and, perspective and different aspects of identity and all of those things. And then we ask our nonprofits, we have a multi-part vetting process for our nonprofit partners to really get to know them deeply, both so that we know it's a really strong, viable board seat or multiple seats that they have available. And because we want to get to know, what are the gaps that they're experiencing on their board, the skill gaps, the gaps in identity, gaps in experience and perspective, where someone's from, all of those things. And we want to make sure, it's a space and a culture that's going to work for an individual that we're then trying to match to them. So it's certainly a bit of a dance. We actually run the whole program online, and we developed an algorithm for it a few years ago. We actually find that the matches are a lot stronger when humans do them, which gives me confidence in the future of humanity. So hopefully that makes everyone else feel that way too.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, thank you both.
Yeah, and I'll just add one other thing. Outside of Board Lead, I mean, we had a really positive experience with Board Lead, but outside of Board Lead, we sort of have a matrix of, we want a balanced board in skill set, in an experience, in age, in gender preference, in, racial, in region. We serve the DC metropolitan area, so we want to make sure we have representatives from DC, Maryland, and Virginia, and also in industry. So, when we're looking at recruitment, if we have 4 lawyers on the board, we may have a great candidate, but we may feel like, we have enough legal expertise. We really need somebody in, finance or in real estate. We're going to be heading into a capital campaign in the next couple of years. And so we look at all those things, and the nominating committee consists of several board members. And then I'll just say, from a board president standpoint, one thing that Food and Friends does that I think is really good, and I don't know no other organization I've worked for has done this. When they're selecting the next board president, they convene all the previous board presidents to discuss, who would be the best candidate for succession, which I think is really, really strong.
Great, thank you.
And Brian, did you have anything else to close, or are we ready to open it up to questions?
No, I think we can open it up. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Brian. Yeah, any questions? And I know we sent out some discussion questions, but before we get to that, any questions for Erin and Brian? I have a question, Erin. How can we, and again, going back to that strategy piece, how can we prepare ourselves for when maybe none of us have worked for a nonprofit or done kind of management consulting or something like that? How can we prepare ourselves to really kind of advise on that strategy piece when we may not have that background?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kate. I think this is something that folks get hung up on a lot when it comes to actually a lot of board member roles and responsibilities is sort of, how can I do this if I don't work at a nonprofit or if I've never served on a nonprofit board? And I think this actually goes to an earlier question about sort of having that fresh perspective. A lot of boards are looking for folks who don't work in the nonprofit sector because that different perspective, oftentimes a business perspective or a healthcare perspective, a legal perspective, those kinds of different ways of thinking can be really helpful for boards. So actually bringing that lens that you uniquely have can add a lot of value. I also think, and Brian, I loved what you said before about, preparing for the whole like board vetting process as if it's an interview. Such a great idea. I could not agree with you more. And I think in line with that kind of thinking, I think oftentimes, sometimes humans sort of sell themselves short in terms of being able to transfer skills from one arena to another. And I think that certainly happens with board members. Again, I think it's easy to be like, I've never set strategy for a nonprofit. How can I do this? But I'm sure all of us at work think about, what am I doing now? Where am I going with this project or this team or this program? And, how are we getting there? Right? It's the same thing the nonprofit's doing, it just with a different goal, right? It's just a slightly different agenda. So bringing those transferable skills and really identifying where those can plug into board service, I think is really helpful. How do you set goals? How do you set strategy? How do you design a plan? Are all things that are really critical. The last thing I'll just say is I think a really big part of being a high impact board member is also thinking about the community and really being a champion for what the community's needs are. So the more that you're able to bring that external perspective that you uniquely have and bring that into the boardroom, the better job the organization can do actually serving that community.
Thanks. That's great insight, Erin. Now, I know, Erin, in your bio and just from talking with you, that you help to recruit diverse members for boards. Which is great. And I know that everyone is looking for more diversity in their companies and their organizations right now. But do you do anything with making sure that that board is really going to be receptive to diverse members on their board, or whether it's just going to be tokenism? We have the Black person, we have the woman, we have someone who's LGBTQ. How can we make sure that if I'm coming into that situation, it's going to be a comfortable situation for me?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I really appreciate you asking it, Kate. That's something more that we're really thoughtful about. I think, we have the luxury of being an organization that has a program dedicated to this work. So I'm happy to talk about our process and then share a little bit about what I think individuals could possibly do. And I totally agree with you. I think oftentimes we think about, boards want diverse candidates. And frankly, that's something I hear a lot. And diverse candidates does not mean anything, right? Because diversity is all contextual, right? It's diverse compared to who is in the room. So we have to understand who's in the room and who's not in the room to figure out, who's missing and whose voices need to be brought into that space and really amplified. So what we do is we, as part of our application process, we ask nonprofits to speak, to both write and then to speak explicitly about their board's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion as values, their staff's commitment to those values, how the organization's moving those forward. We ask them about the culture of the board and ask them to speak to that. And we really look for organizations that make it clear that they are not looking to recruit just diverse candidates, and that if an organization makes clear that, for example, they're looking to recruit folks from the Asian American Pacific Islander community, or they're specifically looking to recruit people with disabilities, or they're specifically looking to recruit Black women, that they're doing it because they specifically see that their organization serves that community and that that community needs more of a voice and more power in their boardroom, that they're not doing it, as you said, Kate, just to check a box. So that's something that we really have as a multi-step part of our conversations with our potential partners to make sure that they're aligned with how we see diversity, equity, and inclusion being lived out in the boardroom. In terms of an individual exploring that, I think it's really, really important to think about, as Brian said, again, to think about seeking out a board seat as an interview process. And just like if you're interviewing for a job, right, you're being interviewed, you're also doing the interviewing, right? And you want to make sure it's a space where you want to be, where you feel like you can thrive, and that also feels like safe and welcoming to you. And that likely won't be the case at all organizations and in all spaces. So I would certainly encourage folks to really ask questions, even if it might be scary, if it's uncomfortable. I know we talk about, asking questions around fundraising and stuff like that, and that can be uncomfortable, and thinking about how can you practice that at home or practice in the mirror, practice with a mentor. I think the same about, asking questions about, can you tell me more about the culture on your board? I noticed that your board is, it looks like most of your board members are men, or male identifying, or based on the website, it looks like it's a pretty racially homogenous board. Like, can you share with me more about, the current composition and some of your goals around diversifying the board? And, asking questions like that, again, can be really uncomfortable. But I do think it's important, right? You don't want to get onto a board and then a year or 2 years later be like, this is just a bad experience. I'm not about this. Super important to really set yourself up for success there.
Those are great tips. Thanks, Erin.
Great question.
And Brian and Erin, you may be able to answer this question too, since you recently joined a board. Can you talk a little bit about the time commitment so far in being on this board? And maybe it's a little bit different because it's been virtual, but how has that commitment been for you?
Yeah, so I can start. I think typically, I'll speak from the Food and Friends perspective, but there's 4 meetings a year, right? And they're about 2 hours and typically we'll meet on a weekday evening, right? So similar to this time. Currently it's virtual, but I think it's been in person in the past. And, I'll just say overall time commitment is about 6 to 10 hours a month, right? So whether that's preparing for the board meeting or, participating in other events like this, it could be fundraising, volunteering, all that kind of goes into that 6 to 10 hours, right? So, to me, I don't think it's a heavy commitment, right? But obviously we're all, we have jobs, we're all professionals, family life, whatever. It is a commitment, right? You do have to block out time. You do have to make it a priority. And again, I find just spending a couple hours, during the weekend, Saturday, Sunday, just doing the reading, doing a few things that I need to do, really prepares me for the board meeting and whatever comes. So.
And was that outlined for you before you or during the vetting process, that time commitment?
It was. Yep. So I think, and that's definitely one of the questions you should ask in your interview, right? Just understanding what that time commitment is. It's going to vary by board. You don't want to get yourself in a situation where you don't have to fulfill for the expectations. The hours commitment is too much, and you can't balance it with your other responsibilities. So again, just making sure you're asking those questions, really evaluating the fit before you, accept or pursue the opportunity any further.
Mhm. Great. Erin, anything else you wanted to add to that in terms of the time commitment for your board?
Sure. I'll just say briefly, the board that I joined is, I would say probably on the other end of the spectrum, the opposite end from Food and Friends. It's a very like grassroots organization that doesn't have a lot of structure. There's no full-time paid staff. So the board is really doing a lot of the work of the organization, which when I put my consulting hat on is not best practice. So for me, it was an exciting opportunity to sort of jump into an organization where I felt like I could actually add a lot of value given the work that I do. But I think that so it's a very big time commitment actually, because there's just a lot going on. What I think that speaks to is that, as Brian said, the organizations are going to have different kinds of time commitments. They're also going to be different in terms of what they're potentially expecting of board members. So some organizations are going to have a really great onboarding program, that Carolyn and Brian have both brought up. Some organizations are not going to have great onboarding for board members. So I think those are things too to think about, really asking, as Brian said, ask about the time commitment. Ask about, what does a month look like for a board member? What does onboarding look like? Are there mentorship opportunities where I can work with a board member as my mentor for the first year of my service? How does the board support the structure of the organization? What does governance look like? Getting a sense for those things, I think, is important because while boards, there are certainly best practices, boards will, take shape in different ways.
Well, one of the questions that we asked before we came here today was if there are any challenges or anything that anyone on the Emerging Leaders Network is worried about when it comes to joining the board. And so I'll open it up to the group. I know one thing that can worry me is just about the fundraising commitment and being able to be able to raise the funds that might be necessary for a board. I see some nodding heads.
I mean, in terms of the fundraising commitment, it is such an important element to board service. It's that time, talent, treasure. And as an organization, like it's our job to, as staff, it's our job to work with the board and help them understand, each individual member, help them understand, how they can serve as ambassadors and help with that. And one of the things that we did this year, which Brian, we've not sat down with you or Joan yet, but we will, is we sat down, we scheduled one-on-ones with each board member and asked them to develop a list of 10 individuals, a prospect list. And it could be individuals they know personally or individuals they know through work or, church or whatever community they're in, and or individuals they're connected to on LinkedIn, so that from there we ask them to make one introduction per quarter and also make 5 donor thank you calls. And I would say, I think we've sat down with about 70% of the board for the prospect list. And in terms of the one introduction, we're probably, and I'm guessing, we're probably at 60% success rate in terms of that. And some of that is, the timing when we went through each individual, the timing might be wrong. Like we want to invite them for a tour, but people weren't comfortable yet coming out for a tour. So that's kind of been pushed back. And then we had, some people we had one board member who did a Facebook fundraiser. He's been involved for a number of years, and he's introduced a number of people over the years and raised funds for us. But this was a whole new list of individuals that then, Marilyn, for example, was able to follow up with him to talk about each of the individuals from the Facebook fundraiser, like how, who they are, and what appropriate next steps might be. And lots of times this is the right place for them, that they may not consider a major gift or don't have the potential of a major gift, but keeping them involved, inviting them to events, maybe encouraging them to sign up as a monthly donor. So that's and that is something we want to work with you all, in your role as ambassadors for the organization and through the Emerging Leaders Network, make it as easy as possible for you to feel comfortable introducing people to Food and Friends and serving as ambassadors. And so things like Slice of Life are a great way, because it's an easy plug-in. Everybody can, identify with pie, right? So.
Tanika, you have oh, sorry.
Oh,
Andrew.
I was going to ask Erin and Brian about your experiences with board dynamics. Obviously, a board experience is much more enjoyable if you feel like, not necessarily that everybody agrees all the time, because I think you actually probably don't want that, but that it's sort of a collegial environment, and that you really respect the people that you're working with, and not having too many knockdown, drag out fights. So I just want to know, has your experiences been generally, positive in that regard, or have you experienced moments where, there is some conflict that, does sort of make you uneasy, or it's difficult for the organization to know how to navigate that?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I haven't really seen any of the difficult situations that you described. I would say kind of the biggest thing is when you're going through just different topics, issues that come up in a board meeting. A lot of people have thoughts that come to mind, right? I would say one thing is just taking responsibility for your recommendations, right? It seems simple, but like one thing you need to realize is nonprofits have limited resources, right? So I could see one issue being people making recommendations but not wanting to take the steps to follow, right? Not wanting to roll up the sleeves and actually do the work behind it. So I can see that being a potential issue. But again, I haven't experienced that to date. It's been pretty, the board at Food and Friends works pretty well. People definitely speak up. They raise, their concerns. They challenge, other members in a respectful way. But, I think generally speaking, we tend to kind of coalesce and reach agreement. So.
Yeah, Andrew, it's a good question. And Brian, I love your thought about owning your ideas. I think that's really great. The board I'm on actually does have some conflicts just coming out of COVID. They had to shift their programming, and there are basically now two schools of thought on how the organization should move forward in the pseudo post-COVID world that we're sort of living in the U.S. Or parts of the U.S. So it's been interesting to join in the midst of that tension. I would certainly call it tension. I think something that's important in my experience, and I've also seen a lot of boards in conflict, I think something that is really critical is regrounding the work in the mission and in everyone's sort of shared stake in that. And just reminding everyone that this is a group of people who are all here because they care, and they care specifically about doing this work well for the community and really making a difference. And aligning around that, I think, is really important. I also know that there can be board dynamics that can be more interpersonal and much more complicated. And I don't know that we need to go too deep into that, but if that were to happen, I think it's really critical to be in touch with the board chair for support, and if not the board chair, someone else on the executive board, however, whatever is most appropriate, to make sure that, every board member is getting the support that they need.
Yeah, no, thanks both. That's a helpful perspective.
Yeah, I'll actually add one more thing. I mean, as an executive team, I know, we definitely don't want board members to just check a box. We really depend on the board to provide a different perspective and to ask tough questions to help us think through, because when there are programmatic or not so much operational, but we're moving into this growth phase for the organization. So there will be, a lot of dialogue. And I think the board's role in those discussions is so important, and not just to rubber stamp, whatever the executive staff is recommending or sharing. Oh shoot, there was one other thing I was just going to say. I forgot.
Well, the first thing was good. So yeah, no, it definitely seems like you want people who will, challenge perspectives.
Oh yeah,
go ahead.
I know what it was. The other thing, like, communication is so important. And Erin, what you said about, if there is tension, or like, I know that Carrie, our executive director, and Skip, our board president, have a weekly call every Friday. And, keeps Skip kind of, he's not in the weeds in terms of our operations, but if there's an issue that comes up that needs to be, that the board needs to be informed about, that will come up, and they'll discuss that, or they'll discuss, the agenda, or if there, was a concern that a board member had brought forward, they would discuss that. So I think communication is so important, and that it is important for board members to feel comfortable reaching out to the board president or a member of the executive committee if there's a concern, and to have a good relationship with the executive.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Any other challenges or concerns that anyone has about potentially joining a board or the process? Well, Brian's mentioned something, and I thought it was really great to really think about what goals that you may have, maybe a year out from joining the board. I know that so many of us are interested in joining a board down the line. Has anyone thought about what may be driving their interest or what their goals are down the line? Does anyone think they're going to want to take any kind of board leadership position later, or too soon to tell? I know some people just like to lead whatever organization they're in. Oh, Jonathan, I see you took yourself off mute.
I mean, I've been on boards professionally and personally, and I've founded organizations where I've been a founding member of a board. I've joined existing boards, and I enjoy typically the role of board member. The difficult part for me is time. I would imagine that is the case for the vast majority of people on this call. So, finding the time, I know it's a generic excuse, but that's what I grapple with. I think leveraging technology is going to make that a lot better. So maybe I guess one question is, how does the Board of Food and Friends think about, doing Zoom type board meetings going forward, or, otherwise allowing for more flexibility from their board in terms of how they interact interpersonally and things like that?
No, that's a great question, Jonathan, and it is always a challenge because when we volunteer, we want to make a commitment. We want to fulfill that commitment, and so we do have to think about like the time involved. From a technology virtual standpoint, I mean, Food and Friends has always had the ability to call in to board meetings, and now, of course, we have Zoom, and our calls this whole past year have been via Zoom. But we do, we will probably have, and I can't speak for Carrie and Skip. My guess is, we may try to do like 2 Zooms a year and then 2 in person. I know we really want to do the September board meeting in person. We have a board member who will be retiring from the board. He's been involved for really from the very beginning, on and off. And we want to do a celebration with him. And we also had discussed doing a reception before the board meeting. So the board meeting starts at 6. We had talked about doing a reception with this group so that there's an opportunity to, meet and greet and mingle with board members. So that's on the that's our plan for September. And then from there, I think there's value in coming together in person, but it is, it is a time commitment, and where it would be 2 hours for a board call, a Zoom, if you're planning on in person, that could become 4 hours depending on, where you're driving from and driving to. So it's something I know that we will be looking at, and with a goal of having, at least 1, if not 2, or all in person. And I think Carrie and Skip may want to poll the board, but those conversations are just happening now.
Erin and Brian are, Jonathan, sorry, did you have something else to add? Okay. Erin and Brian, I don't know if you'd feel comfortable sharing any of the goals that you had personally when you joined your boards.
Yeah, happy to share. So, I'll share one. I think similar to Erin is wanting to join a committee that's kind of outside of my comfort zone. So, I kind of, again, PwC, kind of, it's an audit advisory firm, audit tax advisory firm. So I kind of understand the financial aspects, but, I'd like to step out and maybe do something different, like fundraising committee, right? Something that I haven't, spent a lot of time on. But, back to Jonathan's point, like, I have to understand the expectations around that and the time commitment, right? Like, there's the board meetings, but also whatever committee you join also comes with its set of commitments and time challenges. So, but again, I think my goals for wanting to be on this board, one, I think is, just, again, challenging myself, stepping out of my comfort zone, and continuing to just be engaged and support my community. So yeah, that's kind of one thing that pops to mind as a goal. So.
Thanks for sharing, Brian. Erin, anything?
Yeah, one of my goals, I sort of talked about this at a high level. I certainly agree, Brian, with what you said about having goals around my own skill building and sort of deepening some skills and stretching myself to learn others. Another goal that I had is actually use the opportunity to really get to know the community better, and just be a more like active member of the community. I mentioned that, I moved during COVID, and joining this board was a way for me to sort of have more connections. And I think that's an opportunity, even if someone, isn't new to an area, to think about how can I sort of bring my own experience as someone from this community, but also use this experience to learn more about the place that I live, and sort of have that open mind, and really lean in with like a learning mindset, to be, yeah, just a more thoughtful, involved, and open-minded community member.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Any other questions? I know we're closing in on the hour. All right, well, Erin and Brian, thank you for joining us, for sharing your experiences, providing some tips for us as we think about board leadership in the future.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you everyone for coming. And again, Sophia, thank you so much for coordinating the meals. Before we close out today's meeting, I just wanted to stress, if you haven't already filled out that volunteer survey, to please do it so we get a better idea of what kind of programming we're going to do in the next couple months. So Sophia, can we get that maybe sent out after the meeting, just to make sure that everyone has that at the top of their inbox? Great.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thanks so much for everyone for joining, and Brian and Erin, thank you. It was so great to hear from both of you. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, guys. Well, thanks for coming.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.